All right. Hopefully that works. Welcome to 99% Geek Presents a book reading of urban fantasy. My name is Andrew Gatesy, and I am a writer. I write for something called 99% Geek. It's what I call my brand. It's 99geek.ca. You don't have to spell it out, just 99geek.ca. And that'll give you links to everything. Basically, what I do is I write novels. My goal in life was to write for television, but it didn't really work out that way. So it's difficult to break into television. Who knew? So I started writing novels, and I write them as if they were episodes. I write chapters for these novels as if they were episodes of a TV show, and release them once a month on my Patreon page. For my subscribers, they can subscribe for just $1 a month, and they receive the chapters. Um, they usually range from about 30 to 50 pages. So like they feel about the length and depth of like an episode of a TV show, which is what I'm going for. Um, and yeah, so far on this podcast, I've finished all of season 0 pretty much before I started writing them as a TV show. I did a novel called A Suburban Fantasy about a teenage girl who gets turned into a vampire against her will. But more on that later because that's coming up. And we completed that. I was still learning how to podcast, as I am still now learning how to podcast, as you can tell, as I am very fragmented in my um, train of thought and how I'm doing this. I should really be all scripted and have music in the beginning and um, production values and CG things flying in all over. I don't know how these things work, but I don't have any of that because I'm poor. I am poor and I'm overworked. I work nights just to make ends meet at some shitty job because I don't make money off my writing. Nobody wants to pay for writing anymore. So I make jack all. I have 2 subscribers on my Patreon. That's pretty exciting. And I cherish each and every one of them. And I hope they enjoy my chapters each month. Because otherwise, I don't want them to be paying for nothing. More important to me than the money is an audience and finding people who give a shit and will care about, what I'm writing about and care about what's happening with my characters and what's, to come for them and things like that. So, yeah, so that's the goal. Find people, get them interested. That's why I've started offering my writing for free wherever I can because it's more important that people get involved and get interested and write reviews wherever you can and enjoy. That's the most important thing. I want people to enjoy because that's what this is all about. Um, so we're now at 99% Geek season 1, which is when I began my Patreon. And Urban Fantasy is the name of this book. 99% Geek Season 1 consists of 3 stories that are told at the same time. I jump back and forth between them each month. One month, this month, I will be writing about Isabel Tsung, uh, a Voice News reporter. She is based on a real person, but only loosely based on that person and not at all based on real events, but inspired. Let's say more inspired by that person, inspired by real events. But that's actually a spin-off of Urban Fantasy, and that began in Act 2. This is Act 1. That's one of 5 books in Act 2, but in Act 1 we're still at the only 3, and those books are Urban Fantasy, Adrift Homeless, and the Eldon Chronicles. I've already introduced you guys to Adrift Homeless and the Eldon Chronicles. You should probably download those and listen to them if you haven't already. They are probably my best works. Not necessarily those chapters, but those books are my best works for sure. So definitely look forward to that. But now we are doing Urban Fantasy. And technically, this is season 2 because season 1 was a suburban fantasy, the previous story that I read that isn't as good as this, which is still not that good. This being my podcast and my podcasting ability, not necessarily the strength of the book, which is also somewhat in question. But I've been told that it might be better than I could. I've been told that might be both better and worse than I think it is. So there you go. People both love it and hate it. It is a wonderful dichotomy. And yes, I know how to spell dichotomy because I'm a writer, yo. All right, so Act One of Us Urban Fantasy. New Kids on the Block. Man, I've got this itch in my nose, and no matter how much I scratch it, it is not going away. Oh, hopefully that got it. Alright. Season 2, Chapter 0. Cool story, bro. Previously on An Urban Fantasy. Rachel Lin Smith was just a shy teenage girl until she was turned into a vampire against her will by a crazy serial killing monster. She managed to escape from his evil clutches and get back to her geeky friends like Ian Fraser and Andrew Grezzi and Bilal Valenka and Mike Jones, and together they helped her re-acclimate herself with her old geeky lifestyle and helped her uh, shall we say, suppress the vampire inside. But she couldn't escape from her fate forever, and Eckhart found her in that sleepy town of Oakville, Canada, Ontario, Canada, and he messed with her and messed with her friends and captured her father and her best friend, but she confronted him in a final climatic battle in a church and defeated him uh, once and for all, proving that she was stronger than him. Um, she did so with the help of the school president, Tanya Daytton, who was the most popular girl in school and turns out to have feelings for Rachel and Smith, feelings that are somewhat reciprocated, feelings that Ian also has for her, that she also has for Ian, and there is tension there that is unresolved. Also, it turned out that Tanya Dayton is actually a false name, and her real name is Shauna Dixon, and she is the daughter of the mayor of the town, Joseph Dixon, who turned out was not who he appeared to be either. He was, in fact, a time-traveling mayor who traveled from the past to the present in the hopes to get to the future, and in so doing attracted the attention of a cult of magic worshippers. And we will learn more about that very soon. So thus begins Urban Fantasy, Season 2, Chapter 0. Cool story, bro. Oh, that was a cool story, bro. Water break, do-do-do-do-do. Water break. John Mason had a headache again. It would come and go, the pounding in his temple that was keeping him from thinking straight or looking at bright lights. The pain flared especially with every jerk of the car as his only friend manipulated the wheel and merged onto the off-ramp. They were almost there. Not that John had any actual clue where they were going. They had been driving for days, and John's friend wasn't all that talkative. It was mostly in silence that she sat beside him, foot on the pedal and lights passing by. Her eyes were nervous and darting constantly to her mirrors, peering out from under stringy black hair. They passed a Tim Hortons sign, a shop John supposed served coffee by their logo, though he never heard of them. Seemed there were a lot of them in these parts, but this one was different than others he'd seen. For one thing, it had been burned to the ground. Cars lining up beside a trailer they seemed to be serving from in the meanwhile. John figured his friend must have been driving them north for most of the ride, probably more north than John had ever been. There was snow on the ground, piled along the sidewalks they passed, and melting into slush onto the roads that splashed high under passing tires. John had never seen snow before, never even seen temperatures below 12 degrees. He had been raised in Texas, his family still there now, both his mother and father likely newborn brother. He'd never get to meet his brother, hadn't seen his mom or dad in over 6 months now. Not since they gave him to the government for help. Not since the experiments. John marked that day on his mental calendar and watched over time as the days passed and that date ever so slowly orbited him. His mental calendar surrounded him at all times, one of the many perks of his abilities. He could always know what time it was, what day, what year. He could even flip through his calendar like a file folder, pulling out specific memories and viewing them like he was still there. But all his many abilities came with a price, mainly the headaches like the one threatening to turn his stomach out now. How long had it been since he last swallowed the pills they used to give him? What would happen when the drugs wore off? We're here. We're there. We're somewhere, his female friend said, and John breathed deeply, trying to fight back his nausea. Pulling on the door handle as hard as he could, John flopped out of the car and threw up onto the curb. Oh. Hoping for any relief from the throbbing in his head as he evacuated his stomach would have been futile. His head pounded as he lifted it up. Ah. And saw the 2 pills his friend was handing to him. Swallow these. John took the pills and stared at them nervously. These aren't the ones from the lab, he observed, his brain imagining all kinds of scary concoctions that could be within the pills she'd just handed him. It's Tylenol, his friend told him. I used to know someone with your condition who would pop them with every meal. This wasn't the first time John's friend had mentioned her friend, but she was constantly short on details, like names. Where's your friend now? John asked, tired of her restraint. Dead, she said to him without seemingly any emotion, and John suddenly didn't want to swallow his pills. Take them. They'll help. He did so at last, his head hurting too much for him to argue. You know, I appreciate everything you've done for me, he told her, but I've been on the road with you for nearly 3 days now, and I don't even know your name. She shifted her weight, her eyes still darting all about. There was something about her. From the moment John met her in that cell, he knew they had done something to her, made her a little feral. Fine, let her have her secrets. Though why she'd save him in that cell, only to not trust him any step of the way, was beyond him. I don't even know where you've taken me, John said quietly, quickly changing directions. She was rarely even this social, and once she shut down again, that would be it. We're in Canada, she told him, wrapping her puffy jacket tightly against her. They had been given their clothes by another friend of hers, a woman who had actually given a name. What was it again? Melanie? Talked about some kind of resistance, gave them a car, and just sent them on their way. I figured that part out for myself, John said darkly, when we stopped and stashed your guns 10 minutes before crossing the border. Her eyes centered on him, and it was strange how intimidating the shorter woman could be, even as John had almost a foot on her. You're frustrated, his friend said, though John wasn't sure if she was speaking a question or making a statement. Until we're sure they're not right on our tail, it'll be best the less you know. She nodded a little, as if assuring herself as much as him. John was about to suggest all the ways that made no sense, but they were suddenly interrupted by a large portly woman with a big smile. She was wearing a big fluffy Disney sweater and carrying a large Tupperware container of what looked like cookies. I heard you folks were moving in today, she clamored with a fake laugh. Ah ha ha ha, as she tripped over something in the deck. Whoopsie daisy, she mumbled something more in disdain. The weeds on this lawn. She looked at them both through the dark and frowned. "Well, you're both pretty darn young now, aren't you? Where are your parents?" John's friend didn't approach the woman, but stood very still as if ready to pounce. "I'm his legal guardian," she said coldly. The new woman seemed a little. Maybe I should try that again. "I'm his legal guardian," she said coldly. Did that sound cold enough? The new woman seemed a little unnerved, shifting the container under her arm. She seemed about to ask the girl's age when John stepped in front. "My name's Suddenly John's friend interrupted him. "Mason Alexander." John threw her a look, but her face was unreadable. "Mason," John told the woman, apparently. "You heard we were coming?" The woman smiled a big scary smile. "Nothing happens in this neighborhood without my knowing about it," she explained to them in such a way that scared John a little. "I'm head of the neighborhood watch here, Carol Mendez." "You don't look too Spanish," John's friend said bluntly, still eyeing the older, larger woman as a hunter would eye prey. "Of course, my husband's name, of course," she said, reaching out to hand John's friend the Tupperware container. The girl didn't want to grab it. "His father was Mexican, don't you know? I made these for you. Thought you'd get here a little earlier." "It's 2 in the morning," John's friend said suspiciously. 1:38, John corrected her without looking at a clock. "Oh my!" Carol said, her warm smile permanently plastered to her face. Even in the dark she seemed to glow. "I welcome every new member to our neighborhood. It's my duty, day or night." "Well, thanks," John's friend said darkly, taking the Tupperware container in a huff. "We feel very welcome. Hope you have a good night." "Oh, of course," Carol said with another disgustingly warm smile. She turned to leave, but stopped suddenly. "I didn't catch your name, miss." Vicky Robinson," John's friend told Carol without a thought. "Beautiful name," Carol told Vicky, who seemed to smile slightly. She never did that. Again Carol turned to leave. Perhaps that had been why. But again the woman stopped. "There is one other thing. How old did you say you were?" "Old enough," Vicky said, her smile gone as if it had never been there at all. "I'm 16, John told her. If nothing else, she seemed harmless. "You know," Carol said, "I work at the office at the local high school, Abbey Park. You might have heard of it." Vicky frowned, backing away from the woman towards the front door. "I haven't," she told the woman with disinterest. The woman was determined, most specifically it seemed, to not leave them alone. "I could start your application if you wish. Set everything up to get you into classes and learning again as soon as possible. My pappy always said learning is half the battle. How's that all sound to you?" "Unnecessary," Vicky said coldly to the large woman. "Also, your pappy stole that from G.I. Joe." I'll do it," John told Carol, it seemed to Vicky's disagreement. Unless he gave in to this woman on something, John didn't think anything would get Carol's nose out of their business. "Splendid," Carol told them. "Then I'll see you Monday morning." That's in 6 hours," John corrected her. "I mean it," she told them before making it back across the lawn. "You're both so very welcome in Oakville, the safest town in Canada." Kind of lost it there. John turned around to finally view their new house for the first time. It was more of a townhouse, really, with a tiny front yard and no driveway. At least it was 2 floors, John supposed, taking in the brick building with thinly veiled frustration. "What are you What are we even doing here? We're supposed to be hiding, Vicky scolded him quietly from a distance. You absolutely can't enroll there. You shouldn't even be seen by people when you can help it. John gestured to their new townhouse. Might be a little rough when we're rubbing elbows with our neighbors, he argued. And with Snoopy Gonzales breathing down our necks, Vicky added with annoyance. She was still watching their backs as if expecting the woman to return in numbers. She's not coming back, he tried to assure her. She'll be seeing me in the morning tomorrow. He was actually a little excited to be going back to school, like a normal kid. He hadn't actually ever been to school before. His parents had homeschooled him right up until giving him over. Vicky crossed her arms. And how do you expect to enroll without proper identification? She asked him, a question John supposed he hadn't considered yet. More importantly, what happens when we have another episode? When you have another episode? You know what I mean. If, John corrected, maybe without all these drugs, my headaches will subside. Vicky didn't say anything. If this is where I'm gonna be jailed for the rest of time, should we maybe see inside? John asked, but his friend still didn't respond. Vicky? My name isn't Vicky Robinson, she told him, finally moving to unlock the front door, an act that John supposed meant a yes to his question. Are you serious? John exaggerated angrily. Everything I know is a lie. Don't be so melodramatic, Not Vicky told him. She seemed to think for a moment before finally saying, Erica Sanic. The look on her face told John that she hadn't said her name in a very long time. Who was Vicky Robinson, that the name came to Erica faster than her own? If that's even the real one this time, John groaned out loud as he followed Vicky / Erica inside. The inside of their hideout was far more comfortable than John had been expecting. The weeds in the lawn had suggested to John a state of unkempt that the inside didn't match remotely. The hardwood floors were elegant and warm, and though there was no furniture to be seen, there was a fire lit in the fireplace. Stairs led up, and there was a small kitchen past the living room, barely a room of its own. I got the floor, John said, discouraged at the lack of furniture. Where are you going to sleep? Vicky, or was that Erica? John was having a hard time keeping up. Ignored what he just said. Instead, she assured him, It's my real name. She stepped close to him, then close enough that John could see her eyes even in the dim moonlight through the window. You can't tell anyone. As far as everyone else is aware, I'm Vicky and you're Mason, and that's how things have to stay. Why? John asked, searching her eyes as if they might hold the secret somewhere within. Do you have a plan? That was the plan, Erica told him. It's why I brought you here. They're not going to stop looking for us. We had to leave the country, and even then, I don't know if that was enough. As far as plans go, that one seems a little simple. Why here? John asked, looking past Erica's shoulder to the sleepy suburb outside. Why'd you choose Oakville of all places? Didn't you hear what Paula Dean said? Erica asked John, finally putting some distance between them to check the water pressure in the kitchen. This is the safest town in Canada. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Somewhere in Oakville, in a dark alley deep in the old downtown district. I should have gone for a water break before doing this, but water break. Do. That was delicious. Alright, 3 stars later. Somewhere in Oakville, in a dark alley deep in the old downtown district, a door opened. That was a lot of D's. I want to say that one again. Somewhere in Oakville, in a dark alley deep in the old downtown district, a door opened. That was a good feeling sentence. Sometimes sentences just roll off the tongue. That was one of those sentences. One more time. Okay. Somewhere in Oakville, in a dark alley deep in the old downtown district, a door opened. Mr. Moore hadn't expected that door to be on the second floor of a building, opening out into nothing. and he fell from that door, landing harshly in a pile of garbage. Who would build a door like that? Mr. Moore and the door groaned. He was getting too old for all this running and falling. He'd done a lot more of it in his youth, but had since left Her Majesty's Secret Service to retire in the U.S. Now he was in Canada, in a sleepy city called Oakville. He'd never heard of the place before, but he was there now for a reason. He had a message from Mayor Dixon. Was his hand in a diaper? Mr. Moore forced his creaky bones to get out of the mess he'd landed in, wiping the duty off his sleeve onto the brick of the nearest building. Looking up at the door he'd fallen from, he supposed there could have once been a fire escape leading up to it, but it had long since been removed, probably in anticipation for Mr. Moore's arrival, he supposed darkly. Pulling out his cell phone, the elder British man tried calling the number of his friend again, but still it just kept ringing. Why wouldn't the dumbass answer his phone? Was it really too late? Moore had to warn him, had to stop him from falling into their trap, and he had to move. They would be coming through the door soon. They would be after him, and he'd need to be long gone. Or were they already there? There was a shuffle from deeper in the alley. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. In the darkness Moore's eyes couldn't pierce. He drew his gun, his trusty SIG Sauer P230, and pointed it at the darkness. There was no way a full-grown human was hiding there. The shape seemed smaller. And was it crying? "Hello there," Mr. Moore said in his deep accent, turning on the flashlight on his phone and raising it to just under his small pistol. The light landed softly on the outline of a little boy shivering against the alley wall. It was cold that night, cooler than where Mr. Moore had just been, cold enough that his hands were starting to ache. "Are you all right, boy?" "No," the boy said in a strained voice. "I'm hungry." He couldn't have been older than 4 years, a small little thing clinging to life. "Where are your parents?" Moore asked. He didn't have time for this. He had to deliver his warning before it was too late. The entire world depended on it. Only he knew the entire truth, the pieces that both sides were missing. He had to tell Dixon, or everything they'd been working towards since he'd met the man a decade ago would all have been for nothing. "I didn't know," the boy said. "I've lost them. Would you help me find them?" Mr. Moore lowered his gun and started dialing on his phone. "All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'll dial the authorities, and then they will come to take care of you. Then I'll be on my way. I'm a very busy man." "No," the boy hissed. "Stay with me, please." The boy inched closer to Mr. Moore, keeping still only just enough distance so that Moore couldn't see his face. "I'm scared," he whispered, "and so hungry." "I have something here," the elder man said, reaching into his blazer for a granola bar he'd stashed there earlier. He knelt down and held the bar out for the child. "There's really no use to fear now, boy. Come out here." The boy inched closer, the light illuminating his eyes as he fixated on Mr. Moore's hand. "It's all right, my boy," Moore said softly. "Completely safe to eat." Oh my. Sorry, I was just readjusting my camera. All right. "Completely safe to eat." "You promise?" the boy asked, coming a little further from the shadows and grabbing not the granola bar, but Mr. Moore's outstretched hand. "What are you all about?" Mr. Moore asked, pulling the boy out from the shadows and into the light. "Let me see you, boy." In the light, the elder gentleman could see the boy was pale, a skinny, naked little thing, and his teeth long and sharp, glistening white in the moonlight. "My God," Mr. Moore said, "what are you?" The boy pulled Mr. Moore's hand towards him and screamed, "I'm hungry!" he said loudly, biting down on Mr. Moore's wrist. Mr. Moore screamed as the shock gave way into pain. Ah! Ah! Was the boy drinking? Still screaming, Mr. Moore tried to get to his feet and pull the boy with him, but the boy held him in place with disproportionate strength, ripping messily at the old man's skin. Blood smeared down the boy's face, drenched his hair as he drank deeply. Mr. Moore could feel his energy draining away, his muscles turning to soup as his life juice sloshed around his knees. With one desperate attempt he tried to pull his gun and point it at the kid, nay, the monster. He had to get away, had to tell Dixon what he knew. Dixon had to know he was heading into a trap. The boy grabbed Moore's gun hand and twisted it with a mechanical-like grip, breaking Moore's hand clean at the wrist. Mr. Moore tried to scream even louder than before. Ah! But he was getting ever so weaker. Ah! Drowning down into the darkness of the alley. He wasn't going to be giving his message to Dixon, or to anyone. He was going to die with doo-doo on his sleeve. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Water break, do-do-do-do-do, water break. Did you know water is good for you? You should drink lots of water. You don't like water? Get a Brita jug thing with Brita filters and fill that and keep it in your fridge. It'll be cold and delicious and refreshing and taste good and you'll be like, holy shit, I like water now. That's a little tip from your friend. And this has been a water break presented by 99geek.ca. Water break, do-do-do-do-do, water break. Alright, we are on a new scene. This is going to be the main scene. So far, anybody who's listened or read or known anything about suburban fantasy are like, none of this has anything to do with suburban fantasy. Well, there was a vampire kid, I guess that could have something to do with suburban fantasy. But that was about it. What the hell? Alright, new scene. Oh, yes, this. First, I need to prepare a voice. This voice is, I don't know if you guys have ever watched Arrow and seen Deathstroke, but he kind of talks like, Oliver Queen. Something like that, like, I'm gonna get you, Oliver Queen. And he also says things like, he says things like, Shannara, you are the last of the Shannara, Oliver Queen. Alright, anyway, so that's going to be one character. This is another character. This is Joseph. That wasn't Joseph Dixon. That's someone else. This character, Joseph Dixon, is I think I gave him the British accent, didn't I? The classic naked snake. That's right. Brother! Yes, it's me. Of course. It's your brother. Alright, I got this. Alright, cool. So new scene. Let's do this. There are legends as old as written history of a time when another force on this planet was as plentiful as gravity, Joseph Dixon told Hannah Lynn, though she couldn't Joseph Dixon told Hannah Lynn, though she couldn't have given less of a shit. This force could be manipulated by certain talented individuals, and they named that source of power magic. Why did he choose now to talk? Hannah had been watching the rotors spin for over an hour as her helicopter glided rather noisily over the snowy landscape. She'd hoped they were just making a short jaunt to Toronto and back again for dinner, but that was too optimistic. She should have known better, really, once they'd met up with the armed military helicopter now escorting them. "Shut up!" Hannah told her boss. She was furious now, stirring in her silky soft and warm leather seat. "Seriously, unless the next words out of your mouth are where the hell we're going, I don't want to hear it." The mayor opened his mouth to speak, but Hannah cut him off. "I'm not done." She unfastened her seatbelt so she could straighten and be more menacing. Being a shorter Asian woman in her 40s, Hannah knew she wasn't the most intimidating person ever, but still she would have her say. "It's been 3 months since your weird experiment that swarmed our city with bees." She never did find out what happened. He'd done some experiment in a tower that put the whole town at risk and culminated in the whole tower coming down on him. "Now, I never said anything then," she reminded him. "I stuck with you as your assistant, never asked questions." She raised her voice to repeat. 3 months! It's felt like years. "We got a new Star Wars, it's been so long." That's an inside joke, because basically 3 months in the universe, but years in the fact that there were years between me writing the first book and me starting 99geek. And in that time, Star Wars went from not possibly ever there being a new one coming out to, oh shit, there's a new one out. So that was the inside joke that nobody will get now, but it's funny, so you can laugh. Laugh. Thank you. "Suddenly tonight," Hannah continued, and she could see Joseph shrink in his seat, "you tell me to cancel my dinner plans with my family to follow you God knows where for God knows why. It's too late to start explaining things to me, Mr. Dixon. Just tell me where we're going and let me off here." She realized, of course, after she'd said it, that her threat was somewhat emptier in a helicopter than it was in a car. "It's going to get oh, sorry. I was trying to get to that," Mr. Dixon told her, clearing his throat. "It's just a little complicated." "Complicated?" Hannah said, her mind exploding in disbelief. "What's so complicated about a location? Washington, D.C.? Argentina?" She leaned close to him and added in a bemused whisper, "Is it Pandora?" "That's not a real place," the mayor said, frowning while tightening his tie against the collar of his suit. His dark brown eyes behind that once boyish face were clearly getting frustrated with her. "It's less important where we're going, so much as what we're looking for." "Is it unobtainium?" Hannah interrupted. She'd been watching a lot of science fiction lately, since her boss seemed to be living the genre. "It's nothing from Avatar," he told her. "Of course not," Hannah said. "You probably named it after you, like Dixonade or Dixonite." The mayor frowned deeper this time, something Hannah didn't think possible, and he loosened the tie he had only just tightened. "Did someone tell you about Dixonite?" "Oh my God," Hannah said in full realization. "That's a thing, isn't it?" "Nothing to do with where we're going," Mayor Dixon insisted. "Now can I talk, or is it still your turn?" Not the mayor, Hannah, exhaled deeply, but sat back down and let the mayor continue. "Thank you. Now, perhaps you should know, before going forward, that a time traveler from the early 1900s, that I am a time traveler from the early 1900s. Delicious. "I figured that out for myself, actually," Hannah said, proud that she knew far more than he thought that she did. "I've read Thomas Edison's journal." The mayor of Oakville had once been friends with a famous engineer. Well, friends was pushing it. Dixon had used Edison's friendship to help him build a time machine to time travel into the future. Dixon left Edison in his dust, disappearing somewhere Edison's anger would never catch up to him. The 70s. Though outrageous and unbelievable, Hannah had given the topic much thought over the months, and come to the conclusion it would be much easier and more believable to travel forward in time than it was to travel back. Perhaps Dixon had himself frozen or something. That was a concept Hannah could wrap her head around. But why, when he tried again, did it almost destroy the whole town? Dixon continued on, unfettered. Well, you're not the only person who knows I'm a time traveler. When I came out from the time dilation, there were people waiting for me. They'd calculated where I would show up many years before my arrival. Snake, it's me, Liquid. Sorry, I just have to get the voice back. Why, you see, Dixon explained, their founder was once told a prophecy long ago that a time traveler from the past would show up in the present, in the middle of a modern let me start over. You see, Dixon explained, their founder was once told a prophecy long ago that a time traveler from the past would show up in the middle of a modern urban district, and with his death the Tempest cult would bring magic back to the world. That man who gave that prophecy then went on to found the very cult he prophesied, and they went from prophecy to history in the blink of an eye. There was that word magic again. He'd said it earlier, but she'd let it slide that time. Was this really what it was like working in politics? Childish men chasing around childish pursuits? Meanwhile, his city was dealing with very real issues, concerns Mr. Dixon didn't seem too interested in discussing with her. The mayor was staring at her intently now. Say something, he said, breaking the short silence. I can't tell what you're thinking when you look at me like that. I'm thinking this was a really dumb reason to miss dinner with my family. The helicopter blades chopped the air angrily as the craft tilted to the side, making a wide turn. Hannah's stomach lurched at the motion. She wasn't used to being on a helicopter. Only done it maybe twice in her life, certainly never for this long. We're almost there, the mayor told her, noticing her nervous glance out the window. And you wouldn't think all this so dumb if you'd seen what I'd seen. Magic? Hannah repeated the word before he could. She might have been more than a little skeptical. What do you think? Hannah asked the well-dressed security agent sitting beside the mayor. The security guard startled at her addressing him, and she had to suspect that no one had ever done that before. By the way, those sirens are on my end. I apologize if you've been scared out of your wits because you were like, where the fuck are those sirens? People are dying somewhere. Oh, God. You jizzed or something. I don't know. I've met people who get really freaked out at sirens. Where were we? What do you think? Hannah asked the well-dressed security agent sitting beside the mayor. The security guard startled at her addressing him, and she had to suspect that no one had ever done that before. What? He asked in a deep voice. He had an onyx black tie similar to Joseph Dixon's, and blonde hair greased all the way back. What he just said, Hannah insisted of the guard incredulously. You're just okay with it all? Magic, I mean? What? The guard repeated. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Hannah looked back to Mr. Dixon incredulously. How much do you pay this guy? Enough not to pay attention, the mayor told her. All my security staff are very well compensated. As he spoke the words, the helicopter started to drop, another lurch in her stomach. Out the window, Hannah could see a large crater in the ground. It looked man-made, and was littered with light and equipment like the dig site of a major excavation. She couldn't make out much in the dark of the night, besides the little illumination provided by the few spotlights left on.
That's it there, Joseph Dixon said, leaning in close to look out the same window. Oh, yippee, Hannah managed to say with no enthusiasm. Joseph Dixon was watching Hannah's face, seemingly trying to read her emotions. It was getting very annoying. You're angry and confused. No fucking shit, Hannah told her boss. I feel the same way, he said, leaning back in his seat. When I stepped from the early 1900s into the latter, I had no clue what to expect, but it certainly wasn't a welcoming committee. It wasn't 100 men armed with swords and axes and guns and weapons I couldn't even describe. Dixon was looking at Hannah, but his eyes seemed to be looking more past her. They had set up in the ruins of Edison's building, Dixon explained to her, remembering back. They arranged themselves in a formation, trying to create some form of ritual. He laughed quietly under his breath. I didn't even think they knew what they were doing. That became abundantly clear when it didn't work. What didn't work? Hannah asked, starting to kick herself for letting him draw her into his tale. What they were trying to accomplish, Dixon said, his eyes seeming unfocused as he continued. Whatever it was they wanted to do didn't work. The spell, after all their planning and calculating, they said their words and cut my skin until my blood flowed free. And nothing glowed. No sparks shot out their ass. So disappointed were they that I was able to cause a big exploding distraction and run for my life. He flinched, removing the wrapper from a lozenge and propping it in his mouth to soothe a weary voice. To be honest, I've been running ever since. There was a jolt of the craft as the helicopter's treads touched down on the dirt beside the excavation. Dixon didn't seem in a hurry to open the door, even as the rotors slowed. Why run us here? Hannah asked him. I've done a lot of thinking these past number of decades, Dixon explained to her. Oh God, another long-winded explanation. And I don't think a real prophecy is something told only once. I think truly influential events can ripple all over the past and future like waves, influencing sensitive types into predicting things or remembering the past. I have been searching everywhere for more evidence of the prophecy that led the Tempest cult to my whereabouts in the 1970s. Why does it matter? Hannah asked, having a hard time keeping up with her boss's admittedly tricky motivations. It seemed Dixon was going to try a different tack. Do you know what the Pythagorean theorem is? Of course, Hannah said sarcastically. Of course, I know the Pythagorean theorem. He believed all men were descended from apes or elves or something, and magic stuff. The mayor smirked, and Hannah supposed she'd take that as a victory. It's not a theory or belief, Dixon told her, though she figured the title was therefore misleading. It's a universal constant, that the square of the hypotenuse of a triangle is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. Is that algebra? Hannah asked. Dixon nodded and then shook his head before saying, It can be. More geometry, I suppose. But when Pythagoras came up with his theorem, he didn't know that it would be useful for something that had very little to do with triangles. It would be used to calculate the distance of faraway things. Astronomical bodies of stars and asteroids, and all you need is a protractor. Hannah had to admit the mayor was losing her. Sometimes the solution to a thing can be found not by looking at the thing, he told her, continuing to talk, but at the surrounding factors. That's been my approach to figuring out the prophecy. Instead of studying just the prediction, I'd rather try to calculate the sum of the other two sides, so to speak. Drink the water. Ah, puh, puh, puh. It appeared they had taken too long, as the door of the helicopter opened quite on its own. The spinning rotors had already come to a stop. Damn it! Joseph had failed to get to his point in time, namely specifics on why they were there. The man opening the door was hunched over, with reddish skin and short gray hair. In the cold, his face almost seemed like a tomato, and when he spoke it was with a thick Cockney accent. "Mr. Mayor," he said with a smile and his hand on offer. Mayor Dixon looked at the mayor's offered hand suspiciously. "I don't recognize you," he told the man. The man had a strange guttural noise under his breath. "Oh, but I recognize you, Mr. Mayor." He didn't move his hand away. "I was the one who contacted you about the find. The name's Christopher Dalish." When it didn't seem like the mayor was going to take his hand, Hannah stepped in. Shaking it, she introduced herself. "My name is Hannah Lynn, and I'm the mayor's assistant." He had a firm shake. His hand blistered, perhaps from digging. I'm the caretaker here," he told her. She smiled, letting go of his hand and brushing hers against her pantsuit. "You said you contacted him about something?" Dalish looked her over, seeming to judge her, but on what she couldn't tell. "You said you're his assistant?" the old man asked her in his thick accent. "How much is it exactly that he's told you?" Hannah wasn't quite sure what he meant, but she picked her response very carefully. "He told me about the prophecy," she told him. He nodded, backing out of the helicopter. "You'll probably want to see it, then," he told her, beckoning for them to come with him. "Along now, come, it's safe. Oliver Queen, no. Along now, come, it's safe." Hannah looked to Mayor Dixon, who could only shrug, his face a mix of emotion. "Ladies first," he told her. Oh man, I need to splash my face or something, because there is still quite a bit of this chapter left, I'm pretty sure. Alright, give me a sec, I'll be right back. Just a break. Just a break. Coming back from the kitchen, bringing a chocolate bar. I'm having the chocolate bar. I'm having a chocolate bar. Is it healthy? Probably not, but I'm having a chocolate bar. Alright, I'm back. Just had a chocolate bar interlude. Primo. Alright. Alright. So Christopher Dalish, nodding, backed out of the computer. "You'll probably want to see it, then," he told her, beckoning for them to come with him. "Along now, come. It's safe." Hannah looked to Mayor Dixon, who could only shrug, his face a mix of emotion. "Ladies first," he told her. She stepped off the helicopter, the security man stepping off behind her and confirming that the area was clear. They had landed close to the lip of the crater.
a path leading off nearby to wind around the side of the crater all the way down to the large flat bottom. There's no more water in that. Should I got water instead of this chocolate bar? Probably. Got like a sore in my mouth that keeps hurting every time I eat something like this. Let's just do it again. Mm, so good. You guys are probably like, what the fuck's happening in this place? Just go on, man. Sorry, I'll leave the chalkboard on. Alright. She stepped off the helicopter. The security man stepping up behind her and confirming that the air was clear. They had then close to the lip of the crater, a path leading off nearby to wind around the side of the crater all the way down to a large flat bottom. Crates of equipment and tents and tables were all littered about, somewhat without obvious organization. There's no one else here now. Nope, that's not his voice. Oliver Queen. Shannara Chronicles. You are the last of the Shannara Chronicles. Oliver Queen. There's no one else here now. Nope. There's no one else here now. There's no one else here now. Christopher Dalish called to her from the lip of the crater where he was grabbing something from a table. They've all gone home for the night. A different voice surprised Hannah from behind. I've heard agents scouring the world looking for more prophecies like the Tempest one. Mary Dixon told Hannah in a whisper as he joined her outside the helicopter. We're here because I think I've finally found one before they did. He raised an eyebrow at the caretaker Dalish, and they joined him at the lip of the crater. The crater went down for several stories below them, the path winding multiple times, and carved into the walls of the crater appeared to be the numerous makeshift doors. Where did these doors lead? Hannah asked the caretaker. Barely deeper into the excavation, the caretaker Dalish told them. But I believe your real interest is in this here. Look. He raised a stone tablet from the table in front of them and handed it to Hannah. The tablet was only slightly larger than an iPad, though considerably thicker. On it was painted a story, almost like a comic book told with stick figures. It's art, Hannah told Dixon, letting him see the tablet face. Not even particularly good art. My daughter could draw better than this. I would hope so, Mrs. Lin, the caretaker said to her dismissively. Our specialists have come to believe this might have been drawn by a 3-year-old. Something to do with the longer, shallow cuts of stone. By a weaker, less experienced hand. We've had some of the smartest archaeological minds studying these drawings day and night for weeks now, and I think they got that gist of it. He pointed to the first picture, with his fat blistered finger. Now they say this here was a great and powerful man. Big Ed means he's real smart, right? And he's a time traveler, come to a time with big stone tents. See the tents? But he doesn't come alone, the man said, and his voice seemed to darken. Was it just Hannah, or did Christopher seem a little too invested in this story? Almost as much as her boss, who seemed to be hanging on to every word. He brings with him chaos and demons, right? Horrible monsters and things. Dalish took the tablet back from Hannah to point out the last part. And it's only on his death, right? The peace is finally found and magic is restored all throughout the land. There was that word again. Magic, Hannah repeated. Yes, Dalish said. Do keep up. Hannah didn't like the attitude this old man was starting to take with them. Even less did she like the new shade of pale white her boss was turning. This story was realizing all his fears, but it was just a story, right? It took your experts countless days and nights to translate this. Oh, wait,
Sorry, that was supposed to be Hannah saying that. It took your experts countless days and nights to translate all this? She asked the man rhetorically. Because I'm no expert, but just by looking at this thing I can guess there's supposed to be another page before it. Look at that jagged edge on the left while the other edges are smooth. She's smart. Sorry, I was eating more chocolate. Guys are probably like, is he passing out again? But no. I'm just really enjoying that chocolate. And also it really hurts. But it's so good. But it hurts, but it's so good. Alright. So yes. I didn't like the attitude this guy was taking about magic and stuff. It took your experts countless days and nights to translate all this? He asked the man rhetorically. Because I'm no expert, but just by looking at this thing I can guess there's supposed to be another page before it. Look at that jagged edge on the left where all the other edges are smooth. Dixon looked at her impressed, but the caretaker frowned. She supposed he wasn't used to being challenged by a woman. Yes, he confirmed to them. There is another tablet. Excellent. Perhaps that would have something Hannah could use to convince her boss the story wasn't about him. Can we get our hands on it? I can take you to it, Dalish told them, beckoning again for them to follow him this time down the path to the bottom of the crater. They did as they were told almost automatically, especially as Hannah could see her boss was deep in thought. It's down here. They followed the winding path, passing from shadow to shadow in the dimly lit crater. Their feet crunched noisily against the snow with each step. Hannah only finally realized just how cold it had gotten. She wrapped her jacket tightly against her, but it did little to keep out the cold. A snowflake fell and landed on Hannah's cheek. It was starting to snow again. There was a blizzard said to be coming north. Dixon seemed oblivious to it all, barely putting one foot in front of another. You shouldn't be so worried. Oops, sorry, that's, Hannah Lynn. You shouldn't be so worried, Hannah told her boss. Just because somebody says something doesn't necessarily make it true. Dixon didn't respond, and his nodding didn't do much to convince Hannah he'd even heard her. Hannah got closer to look at one of the doors as they passed. It almost looked like a stage door, obviously erected by the excavators, and Hannah could barely make out the edges of the walls around each door, old and sculpted, definitely man-made caves. How old is this settlement? Hannah asked the caretaker as they stepped. Oh Lord, I've got talks on my fingers. As they stepped. I don't know. How old is the settlement? Is the settlement? Hannah asked the caretaker as she stepped over a large wire that led power to a computer terminal set up along the side of the canyon. They were still only halfway through their descent. The caretaker looked over his shoulder with a but clearly heard what she'd asked, for he then immediately answered, We've had some preliminary carbon dating come back suggesting something upwards of 50,000 years ago. 50,000? Hannah repeated. That's before recorded history. Christopher chuckled in such a way to put Hannah on edge. These tablets we found would beg to differ. Christopher picked up his pace, and as the distance between them greatened, Joseph tried to whisper a warning to Hannah. I know every agent that works under me, everyone who has clearance to know the truth about me. That's a very limited pool, and I know everyone in it. You sure? Hannah asked. You didn't know the extent of what I knew an hour ago. I know I've never seen him before, Joseph told his assistant. She started to slow. So what are you saying? Hannah asked so quietly she might have mouthed it. Still, Christopher Daly seemed to hear everything, something he made very clear as they reached the bottom. And I reached for more chocolate, because I am insatiable. So insatiable. Oh, good. Alright. So good. Delicious. Alright. So, Joseph Dixon has just said that he doesn't recognize Christopher Dalish. I'm almost like, should I just end it there? When does this end? Boop, 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 boop. You could end it halfway. Meet me halfway. 14 more pages left. Why would I go that way? That's a terrible idea. Alright, that's it. All we gotta do is read 14 more pages. We've read 20 so far. We can do this. So what are you saying? Hannah asked so quietly she might have mouthed it. Still, Christopher Daly seemed to hear everything, something he made very clear as they reached the bottom.
It's a peculiar thing you not remembering me, especially when I remember you, Mr. Mayor,
Christopher said to them.
I remember chasing after me own tail for decades while you disappeared. Of course it hasn't taken this entire time to find you. We did that sometime before the millennium.
The circumstances were starting to become alarmingly real for Hannah as she pieced certain things together in her head. You're a member of the Tempest cult, she said out loud, wondering if they had just wandered into a trap. She was starting to feel cold, and she didn't think it was from the wind that had picked up.
No,
Christopher said, lying to their faces. Yes, you are, Dixon said, and he nodded to a security agent who pulled his gun from inside his jacket.
No,
Christopher repeated.
I'm not. I'm the founder.
Dixon's security agent raised his gun on Christopher, who suddenly had 2 daggers in his hand. Where he'd just pulled them from, Hannah didn't see, but he threw them effortlessly through the air. One struck against the agent's hand, knocking the gun free, while the other slid neatly into his chest. Hannah screamed and looked back to Christopher Dalish to see a sword suddenly in his hands. Again, where he pulled it from was a mystery to Hannah. Shing! But he spun it into a flurry of motion, slicing the agent's head clean off his body in one swift move. Hannah screamed again. Her time working at a hospital couldn't have prepared her for watching someone die in violence right in front of her. Frozen, Hannah could feel Dixon's hand pressing pressing against her shoulder. He was trying to keep himself between her and Dalish, but what good would that do? She could see the doors all around the excavation. They were all opening, and Dalish's men were pulling out to surround the 2 Oakville politicians. Christopher Dalish, founder of the Tempest cult, pointed his sword at the 2 of them.
Becoming mayor? Now that was smart,
he said, chuckling a little as if his struggles were coming to an end.
Making yourself a public figure. Of course we wouldn't attack you in the open.
Losing that accent hard.
couldn't risk being outed before we were ready, not when we'd been operating in the shadows for nearly 100 years. So we gave you your day, Dalish continued, but now the day is mine. I'm afraid you'll have to be coming with me.
Hannah watched the mayor look around the site. I'd ask you in what army? No, I'd ask you in what army, Dixon said to Dalish, but I think you've already made that abundantly clear. And while you made that clear, I decided to eat more chocolate, 'cause I'm a bad person who doesn't know how to podcast properly. So good. That was the last of the chocolate, don't worry. No more chocolate for me. Hannah watched the mayor look around the site. I'd ask you in what army, Dixon said to Dalish, but I think you've made that abundantly clear. Hannah then could try to count how many men had poured out from all the doors that surround them, but she couldn't imagine they had enough time for her to finish. They weren't all necessarily male, but they were all armed with the same black club-like stun batons, each flaring to life with a spark as the mayor talked. There was more than 100, maybe as many as 1,000. Did I skip something? Man, I do not remember. Maybe it's because I was really enjoying my talk, but I don't remember doing his speech. Now I want to do his speech again. Because now I feel like I did it, and then I just completely blanked it from my mind. I just did it on autopilot. It's like, but his speech deserves better than that. So, he kills the security guard. And she's all like, whoa, her time at this hospital couldn't have prepared her for watching someone die in violence right in front of her. Frozen, Hannah could feel Dixon's hand pressing against her shoulder. He was trying to keep himself between her and Dalish, but what good would that do? She could see the doors all around the excavation. They were all opening, and Dalish's men were pouring out to surround the two Oakville politicians. I feel like I skipped some sort of paragraph in here somewhere. Anyway, Christopher Dalish, founder of the Tempest Cult, pointed his sword at the two of them.
Becoming mayor, now that was smart,
he said, chuckling a little as if his struggles were coming to an end.
Ha 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 ha, making yourself a public figure. Of course we couldn't attack you in the open. Couldn't risk being outed before we were ready. But now, not when we'd been operating in the shadows for nearly 100 years. So we gave you your day. But now the day is mine. I'm afraid you'll have to be coming with us.
Hannah watched the mayor look around the site. I'd ask you in what army, Dixon said to Dalish, but I think you've already made that abundantly clear. Hannah Lynn could try to count how many men had poured out from all the doors surrounding them, but she couldn't imagine they had enough time for her to finish. They weren't all necessarily male, but they were all armed with the same black club-like stun batons, each flaring to life with a spark as the mayor talked. There was more than 100, maybe as many as 1,000. Hannah was starting to wonder if she would ever see her family again. It seemed her survival now depended on her being able to keep everyone talking. Did the other piece of the tablet even exist? She asked Dalish. Or has this whole thing been for nothing?
It's all been for nothing, Mrs. Lynn,
Christopher Dalish told her, his voice reaching a new gravelly low.
Everything is, I'm afraid. But yeah, the tablet's real. I can tell you want to see it, and I'm gonna take great pleasure in keeping it from your boss, as he's kept me from what I've wanted for all this time.
Hannah noticed as Dalish talked about the tablet, he glanced to a nearby table set up under a tarp. She could tell Joseph Dixon had noticed it as well. I wouldn't have... I haven't taken anything from you that wasn't mine to begin with. Dixon spoke sternly to the cult leader, who found nothing but glee in the mayor's defense. He reached into his jacket with both hands and pulled out something. Multiple things. Were those guns of his own? Dixon came armed? Why didn't Hannah get a gun? Wait, Hannah didn't want a gun.
Don't do something stupid now,
The cult founder said to Dixon, a dumb smirk still wide on his lips.
You're outnumbered.
And you brought clubs and swords to a gunfight, the mayor told them, turning slowly to sweep his pistols in every direction. The men Christopher Dalish had brought with him were all dressed in thick black robes that billowed menacingly in the dark. Not one of them flinched.
What do you plan to shoot first, Mr. Mayor? Is it him?
Dalish pointed to one of his men.
Or her?
Hannah wasn't sure how he could fill. I lost it somehow. Hannah wasn't sure how he could tell which was a girl. They all looked like androgynous robes to her. I was thinking that whole row, Dixon said, waving his guns to the right. Dalish took a step towards Dixon. They were only maybe 10 feet apart.
If you think you're getting out of here not belonging to me,
Dalish said to Dixon softly with what seemed to be the limits of his patience,
means you're more delusional than Donald Trump.
Dixon cleared his throat before saying with conviction, It's my life, and I'm not done with it yet. There was a soft click from the walkie-talkie at the mayor's belt. Was Hannah the only one that heard that? What did it mean? Donald Trump. Dixon cleared his throat before saying with conviction,
It's my life.
It's my life, and I'm not done with it yet. There was a soft click from the walkie-talkie at the mayor's belt. Was Hannah the only one that heard that? What did it mean? Dixon pointed his pistol to the right and said, Bang! He didn't pull the trigger. He didn't have to, for a sound like thunder exploded above them and the whole row was swept off their feet by explosive machine gun fire. Hannah screamed, quite against her will, and quite at the top of her lungs, but the chopping sound of the military helicopter was louder as it soared over the lip of the canyon, and the machine gunner opened fire on the circle of cultists. The helicopter had only one major gun, attached to the side. Hannah could just make out other men with smaller arms around the gunner, backing him up. The machine gunner made Swiss cheese of the surrounding men, bloody mist spraying up where once people stood. Beside Hannah, Joseph Dixon was shooting too. A robot cultist was getting close, and Dixon practically hummed off the page. Wait, what? I don't know where I read that, but I think that was a lie. Man, I am like losing it. I'm tired, I'm hot, I'm sweaty, I ran out of water. I need more water. Give me a sec. Oh, man.
One more thing. Alright. Got water. Open the door so that I have air. So I stop passing out. Possibly from lack of oxygen. Whew! As I am talking a lot. Alright. So he turns, he doesn't pull the trigger of his gun, he doesn't have to, for a sound like thunder exploded above them and the whole row was swept off their feet by explosive machine gun fire. Hannah screamed quite against her will, and quite at the top of her lungs, but the chopping sound of the military helicopter was louder as it soared over the lip of the canyon, and the machine gunner opened fire on the circle of cultists. The helicopter had only one major gun attached to the side. Hannah could just make out other men with smaller arms around the gunner backing him up. The machine gunner made Swiss cheese of the surrounding men, bloody mist spraying up where once people stood. Beside Hannah, Joseph Dixon was shooting too. A robed cultist was getting close, and Dixon picked him off square between the eyes. The man dropped in front of Hannah. Oh God, was that a woman?
Get them!
Hannah heard Dalish yell at his men over the sound of her own screams.
Take the mayor alive! At all costs!
It seemed he gave up at that point, and began to move in on Dixon himself. Joseph Dixon turned both pistols on the cult leader and began to let loose. Dalish's sword was a flurry of motion, swinging it back and forth across his chest. And just like that, Dixon's pistols were empty, and Dalish was still standing there. Did he just block every shot with his sword? "You're pretty good with that," Dixon said, stating the obvious. He didn't have time to reload. Dalish was almost on top of them and yelled at them with glee.
I'm going to enjoy this.
Suddenly, Hannah heard gunfire from above them, and Dalish had to flail around with his sword again, this time holding off the sustained fire from an automatic weapon. It seemed a little harder for him, thank God, and he started to pull back. Dixon quickly reloaded both his guns, slipping his pistols into one hand to place the other one on Hannah's mouth. She only just realized she was still screaming. He let go of her mouth, and Hannah took a large breath. Behind them, one of the cultists was shooting up at the helicopter with a pistol, and suddenly his leg was taken clear off by machine gun fire. Hannah screamed again. "We have to get to that tablet," Dixon yelled at Hannah over the excitement happening around them. He fired shots around her, and Hannah's ears rang. "What?" She yelled at him, surprised a little that she wasn't already deaf. Or dead. She wasn't dead or deaf. Apparently she is deaf. "Come on," he seemed to say, though Hannah could only see his lips forming the words. Her mind couldn't comprehend. Her legs were moving, but she didn't quite know how, and each step was like a laborious effort not to trip and fall on her face. Was she ever going to see her family again? Hannah started to cry. "Oh, don't do that," Dixon told her. "I need you to carry the tablet." "What?" she begged him, keeping up if only to hear his answer. "Because I'm busy shooting people," Dixon yelled back, opening fire on 3 cultists charging them. Hannah could hear Christopher yelling at his men to
ignore the helicopter,
but most of them didn't seem to be paying him much attention. Much mind. One cultist got close enough to hit Dixon with his club, and Dixon spasmed from the electricity. His gun was pointed at the cultist's head, but he couldn't seem able to pull the trigger. He was shaking violently, pain very evident on his face. Hannah couldn't take seeing him like that. She hit the cultist in the arm, slapping the club away. "Stop that!" she told him, sounding more like a scolding mom than she'd intended. Joseph Dixon pulled the trigger on his gun, and Hannah was sprayed with the man's viscera as he dropped. She whimpered. I don't know what that noise was. I really don't. No, apparently somebody is watching from Sunfire's stream. That's cool. That's very exciting. Well, welcome. This is a story about well, I was going to say a story about a teenage girl who's turned into a vampire against her will, but currently it's a story about her mother, who works as the assistant to the mayor of Oakville, who is currently being attacked by people. Um, well, she has traveled with the mayor to the United States to visit an excavation site because he is a time traveler from the past, and there's a prophecy that might prove that he will bring about magic in the future, and they are being attacked by a huge cult of people. That is what's going on right now, and a helicopter has come to the rescue. So let us continue from there. They are going for the tablet. Let's see if they can get that tablet which has that prophecy. Hannah could hear Christopher yelling at his bed, "Ignore the helicopter!" But most of them didn't seem to be paying him much mind. One cultist got close enough to hit Dixon with his club, and Dixon spasmed. I already read that part. He was spasming. His gun was pointed at the head. Hannah pushed the arm out of the way. She hit the cultist in the arm. The club slapped away. She said, "Stop it!" And then he shot her at the guy, and then she whimpered, "He's all over me." She raved to Dixon, starting to peel off her clothes. "My husband can't see me like this."
"Thank you, Mrs. Lin,"
Dixon enunciated clearly, grabbing her by the collar and stopping her in her tracks.
"You saved my..."
Oh, I'm using the wrong voice here. I'm sorry. "Thank you, Mrs. Lin," Dixon enunciated clearly, grabbing her by the collar and stopping her in her tracks. "You saved my life." She nodded deliriously. "The table," he said slowly, leading her attention to where the other piece of the tablet lay. So close now. "Come on." Hannah didn't hear him, but followed him dutifully. "I don't want to die like this," she muttered under her breath. What if in heaven you were stuck in the clothes you died in? What was she thinking? A man had just died. On her! They made it to the table, and Dixon put one of his guns down to reach for the tablet when a sword got in the way.
"You can't have that!"
Christopher Dalish spoke to Dixon angrily. Dixon tried to bring his remaining pistol on the cult leader, but Dalish easily slapped the gun away.
"I need you alive," he told the mayor, "but I can still cut off a few limbs."
Christopher started to spin his sword violently, swinging it in circles around him and slicing so close to Dixon's arm that he cut free part of the mayor's sleeve. Hannah's eyes dropped to the table, and seeing her chance, she grabbed the tablet off the makeshift surface, and with all her might she smashed the stone into the back of Christopher's head. The cult founder dropped like a sack of bricks. "Hey!" Dixon yelled, spinning around and putting his finger in her face. "Careful with that." She hugged it tightly to her body, whimpering again. "This is your fault," she accused him, as an explosion went off somewhere behind her. "Get us out of here!" She was shrieking, and not sure if Joseph could understand her, but she didn't care. "And when this is all over, I quit!" Joseph Dixon either understood her, or he'd had a similar idea, for he pulled his walkie-talkie from his belt and pushed the button.
"I need an evac."
Oh, wrong voice again. "I need an evac," he said into the black brick. It looked like something out of the 90s. A voice immediately came back through. "LZ is too hot," said a female voice. "Repeat, can you get to the top of the excavation?" Hannah's gaze traced its way back up the winding path to the top of the excavation. There was no way. We'll see you there in 5 minutes, Dixon told them, putting away the walkie. "Are you insane?" she shrieked again, tears streaming down her face. "We can't make it all the way up there! They're going to kill us!" No, Mrs. Lin. They want me alive," Dixon told her, though it wasn't very reassuring. "Just hold on to that and stay close to me." He dropped one of his pistols, reloading the other, and grabbed a stun baton off a nearby body. "Let's go." Hannah Lin took one last look at Dalish on the ground, and noticed him stir. Dixon was right. It would probably be best if she stuck close to him. Taking off after him across the clearing, she tripped over the robes of a body and fell face first. Dixon didn't even notice, too busy struggling with a cult member. His stun baton slapped against the man's, and Dixon was able to bring up his gun high enough to shoot 2 other cultists over the first guy's shoulder. Surprised, the first cultist tried to grab Dixon's gun, but the mayor jabbed his stun baton into the man's chest and electrocuted him.
Already shaken, Dixon smacked the man across the face with the thing, and the man dropped. Hannah managed to catch up, and they started up the path that wrapped around the excavation. The helicopter was still covering them above, circling and firing down on the cultists, many of whom now had guns and were shooting back. Hannah was never going to make it to the top. She was already out of breath. "I understand you're mad," Mayor Dixon called back to Hannah as she forced her legs to keep up with him. "I should be paying you hazard pay. I'm going to pay you hazard pay, and a big Christmas bonus next December." He smacked a cultist away from him, and the man fell off the path to the clearing below. "What I'm saying is, I really hope you decide against quitting. I really value you as my assistant." Hannah noticed a door near them open, and more men started piling out onto the path. "You're telling me this now?" she screamed at her boss. The helicopter opened up on the side of the excavation, taking out the doorway and all the guys coming through. "You assume we're going to live through this?" she argued with him, her anger towards him giving her some inexplicable strength to go on. Dixon pulled her after him and muttered, "I thought that went without saying." Hannah couldn't think straight with all the dying around her. The tablet was heavy in her hands, and she clutched it tightly as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. She had to get back to her husband. He couldn't raise their kids on his own. "Life insurance!" she screamed to the mayor suddenly. A shot ricocheted nearby, and Hannah quickly ducked her head. "That's what it's going to take! I need to know my family will be looked after." "Well looked after." Joseph Dixon pointed to the tablet. "You literally have my salvation in your hands," he told her. "My list of friends is getting shorter every day, and all the while my enemies grow. Help me not die, and I'll do the same for you, and I'll make sure your family are very well taken care of." A door they passed opened, and a number of men started piling out, carrying weapons. Hannah thought she could see behind them into what looked like an armory room. Mayor Dixon electrocuted the closest person to him and pushed the cultists back through the doorway. He closed the door, and they started off again for the top. A strange quiet behind caused Hannah to turn, and out of some bizarre curiosity she opened the door. The army was gone, and inside was just an empty cave. Water break, do-do-do-do-do. Water break. Delicious. Alright. "Leave that door open," the mayor called down to her, watching from above at what she'd just seen. "Open as many doors on the way as you can, so they can't get through." "I don't understand," Hannah yelled at her boss, following dutifully behind him as he opened a nearby door and kept going. "I don't expect you to understand," he assured back at her. "It's magic. It's ununderstandable." "What?" Hannah shrieked as the mayor pushed for the top. A soldier from the helicopter circling over the mayor's shoulder was shot, and he fell out down into the clearing below. She could only imagine that being her, falling and falling away from ever seeing her family again. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to be led. When she opened her eyes once more, the two of them had made it to the top. "Great!" Hannah said, looking around at the ruins of the helicopter they'd come in on. "Where do we go now?" As she spoke, she felt stupid, for a rope ladder dropped almost perfectly beside Mayor Dixon. He pointed up, and she frowned. "Right." "Shit," he said, noticing something below and raising his gun. "They've got a rocket launcher." Sure enough, someone on the path below them was aiming some kind of missile-launching weapon at the attack helicopter over Hannah's head. Dixon fired a shot at the man, but the shot missed. Excuse me. "How many of those have you got?" Hannah asked the mayor, but he ignored her. He took a deep breath. Ugh. I've got like hiccups going on here. Stop with hiccups. Alright, that's all you gotta do. You gotta threaten them with a punch. "How many more of those have you got?" Hannah asked the mayor, but he ignored her. He took a deep breath and aimed a second time, firing a shot that missed yet again. "Damn it," he said in a calm voice. "Start climbing without me." He started for the edge. "Where are you going?" Hannah yelled after him, but it was in vain, as he jumped off the edge to the path below. shooting down at the cultist with a launcher before hitting the ground seemingly hard. He was obviously winded, but motioned for Hannah to keep going. She was going to comply when a hand grabbed the stone tablet still firmly in her grasp. It was Dalish.
"This is not yours to take, Mrs. Lin,"
the cult leader said, his voice rough like sandpaper. His grip might as well have been mechanical, as Hannah Lynn's struggles were in vain. All she could do was hold on tightly herself. He tried wrenching it from her hands, but she wouldn't let go. He frowned.
"Stop!"
Hannah didn't immediately notice the fluttering of the rope ladder beside her, but she did notice a large man land beside from the helicopter above. It was one of the military escorts, carrying a very large gun that he quickly pointed at Dalish. "Let go of the mission critical!" the soldier ordered the cultist with a firm voice. Above him, the helicopter gunner continued to unload on the onslaughting masses. Bullet casings fell like rain.
"That's not how this is going to play out,"
Dalish said slowly. The soldier didn't hesitate to pull the trigger, but Dalish was faster. He knocked the gun aside so that the shot ricocheted harmlessly away, while keeping his other hand firmly on Hannah's tablet. The soldier took one hand off his rifle to punch at Dalish, but Dalish was fast enough to slap the soldier's fist aside and kick him back. This was her chance. While Dalish was distracted, Hannah pulled on the stone tablet as hard as she could, but still he wouldn't let go. Out of frustration, she began wailing on his chest with her hand. "Let go!" she insisted of him. "Let go! Let go!" The soldier raised his gun to shoot, now beyond reach for Dalish to hit. That wasn't about to stop the cult leader, however, as he slapped Hannah across the face so hard she saw stars, and stumbled. She'd never been hit that hard by anyone in her life, and she could even swear she heard her brain rattle in its skull. Still, she didn't let go. The slack was enough, however, for Dalish to stretch out, grab the soldier's gun, and yank it straight from his hands. Dalish hit the soldier with the butt of his own gun, then threw the rifle aside. Hannah was still hitting the man in the chest, but it didn't seem to be doing her any good. The soldier charged at Dalish, looking for a fist fight, and Dalish with one hand held his ground. Hannah didn't know how he did it all without letting go of the tablet, but Dalish blocked multiple punches from the soldier, striking out with an elbow to crack the soldier across the jaw, before continuing with his momentum to backhand both Hannah and the soldier in one swing. It stung hard, again, but Hannah was braced for it. Dalish tried to pull the stone tablet free, but Hannah wouldn't let go. He yanked hard and she stumbled forward, but held tight. Grabbing the tablet with both hands, she yanked back with all her might, and Dalish used the extra momentum to hit the soldier with a well-placed punch. Clearly disoriented, the soldier swung for a heavy hit of his own, but Dalish pulled Hannah between them, and the soldier caught her hard in the ribs. She could hear a crack, and immediately the pain was like fire. Hannah screamed until the pain in her chest made her stop. Beside her, Dalish had a dagger in his hand, and he threw it past Hannah to dig it deep in the soldier's neck. Hannah saw the look in the soldier's eyes. It was like surprise, as if the soldier hadn't really ever thought it could be him. Hannah could feel her eyes widening as his went dead. She could feel the tear drops streaming down her face, could hear herself whimper uncontrollably, but still she couldn't let go. Before the soldier's body even fell, Dalish grabbed his dagger and pulled it clean. Blood found out to splash Hannah and Dalish as the body dropped. Hannah knew his attention was on her. He was twirling the knife in his hand, blood still glistening on the blade.
"Killing's dirty work,"
Dalish told Hannah, pointing the dagger at her face, the sharpened tip almost touching her nose. She could clearly tell she didn't belong there. He could clearly tell she didn't belong there. Everyone knew she was the odd one out. She couldn't fight. She couldn't even aim a gun straight if she tried.
"You're an interesting woman, Mrs. Lin. I'd hate to have to kill you, too."
Hannah's heart had stopped, and all the sounds of the battlefield around her seemed to drain away. This was it. Either let go and live, or hold on and die. What was she even still holding on for? It was good that she'd zoned out, 'cause otherwise she might not have heard that sound from above her. Was it her imagination? Or was the gunner from the helicopter yelling something at her? What was he saying? Hold on? She was holding on, but was it worth her life?
All you have to do,
Dalish reasoned with her.
is let go of my stone tablet.
Then something hit her face. What was that? The ladder? Hannah looked up at the helicopter to see that it was swinging out over the clearing. Did they want her to hold on? She didn't even really think about it, but discreetly wrapped her arm around one of the rungs and raised one foot casually onto the ladder. You let go, Hannah said after a moment of Dalish studying her closely. Let go or we both go over the edge. At that moment the ladder went taut, and Hannah was startlingly yanked from the ground into the air. Her breath was expelled forcefully, and she was left breathless as she rose over the clearing.
No!
Dalish yelled.
We're not done!
He lifted the dagger over his head and stabbed it into her hand. More pain, this time even more intense than being punched in the ribs. She could feel the blade go right through, feel the fire spread through her nerves. Dalish was lifted off his feet, holding tightly now to both the dagger and the tablet, his entire weight seemingly pulling Hannah's arm out of her socket. Her hand was screaming in silent agony, a shriek of agony only Hannah could hear. Her fingers were spasming, the dagger ripping into her muscles. She let go, and Dalish fell, many stories to the bottom of the clearing, embracing the stone tablet to his chest as he sneered up at her his entire descent. She looked away as he hit the ground, seeing quite enough death for one day. Her hand hurt, her ribs hurt, she was in pain all over in fact, and she had no actual clue how to climb a rope ladder. She was tired. She didn't want to have to hold on any more. Stay where you are! The gunner yelled down to Hannah, saying something else she didn't hear over gunfire and spinning rotors, but she didn't need to. She had a feeling she knew what they wanted. They were descending towards the winding path where Joseph Dixon was fighting back against mobs of cultists pushing in at him. Mr. Dixon! Hannah called to him, only dozens of meters away now. We're coming for you, hold on! He didn't seem to hear what she'd said, but he'd heard her yell, and looked up to see her coming. Grabbing the rocket launcher that was close to him, Dixon pointed it towards the chasing cultists and fired it at the path, causing an avalanche of destruction. The cultists flinched back collectively, and the helicopter swung desperately to control its descent in the shockwave and chaos of debris. They were only a few meters now, and coming in fast. Grab on tight! Oh, no, he says that. Grab on tight, the mayor told Hannah, and they were close enough she could hear him. She wrapped her arms around the ladder tightly and swung into him at an alarming speed. He wrapped his arms around her and held on, but he was clearly winded with a woof. Hannah reached out in her damaged hand to hold Dixon tightly, counting her blessings that they made it out alive, even as the helicopter ascended away from the excavation. Now for the hard part, Dixon said loudly into Hannah's ear. He had to be loud to be heard over the freezing winter winds. Hannah's heart skipped a beat. What could be harder than that? We need to climb, he told her, pointing up. She shook her head. She'd only just figured out how not to fall off, after all. Come now, my dear. It's simply one foot in front of the other. He started up, and reluctantly she joined him after paying attention to his technique. They weren't even halfway up the ladder before the gunner was helping to pull them in. Someone grabbed Hannah's bad hand, and she tried to stifle her pain-induced scream, thankful to be pulled into the safety of the helicopter. She was placed gently in a seat against the wall, and she gripped her hand gingerly. She could almost see right through, or was that her imagination? We need EMTs waiting for us in Oakville, Hannah could hear the mayor tell a soldier as he was pulled in. Hannah couldn't look up at him, couldn't even keep from shaking. Call ahead. Yes, sir. Mayor Dixon sat down in the seat and reached over. They'll be able to look at your hand once we land, he told her, trying to pull her good hand away. Sorry. My eyes are drooping out again. Deep breath. Alright. They'll be able to look at your hand once we land, he told her, trying to pull her good hand away. Are you okay? Don't touch me, she said harshly, getting up to sit across from him. She was hurt, bruised, and covered in dirt. All those people. What the hell was that back there? Hannah asked the mayor, struggling just to get the words out. Her jaw didn't want to stop chattering, her whole body shivering. She was freezing, and based on her time working in a hospital, she figured she was probably in shock, too. What the hell were you thinking? I have a family. If anything had happened to you, I swear your family would have been well looked after, the mayor tried to assure her, though it wasn't very effective. I was thinking of immortality, Joseph Dixon continued, answering her question. I was kind of obsessed with it. You have to understand, I was afraid to die. Well now, I'm very afraid to die, Hannah interrupted him angrily. I believe the day will come when we'll never die, the mayor continued, a smile forming on his lips. Already science is toying with the idea of being able to stop aging with genetic therapy, even reverse it. One day, doctors will be able to replace limbs like we replace a video card in a computer. I thought I'd wake up in a future world with flying cars and no war. Instead, I woke up to Vietnam, a dependence on oil, and worst of all, I had a price on my head. His smile was long gone. They know who I am, where I've been hiding. They could come after my daughter. Hannah's eyes widened. She hadn't even considered that she might not be the only person there with family. I had given up on immortality. To blend in and really play my role, I took a trophy wife and settled down for a mundane life. After a while, I thought I'd be okay with it. I could make do with what I had. I thought I could give up eternity. I was wrong. Eventually, I couldn't help but yearn for more. If only I'd succeeded the second time. If I had left this world for the future, I wanted so bad. Maybe I could have taken all my troubles with me and given my Shauna a decent life. Joseph Dixon leaned back and closed his eyes. Where was I here? Sorry. Let's pretend like that was a water break. And that wasn't just spiraling into unconsciousness again. We'll protect both our families, Hannah heard herself saying before she had honestly really made up her mind. Together. No one is going to get to them. Your family or mine. Joseph opened his eyes, looking at her as if confirming that she wasn't quitting. His clothes were as torn as hers. When she reached out to touch his knee, she did so through a hole in his pant leg. We're going to make sure no one again is ever hurt because of you. Whether or not the prophecy is true, he told her, cupping her hand on his own. They will never stop coming for me. Hannah smirked at her boss. It's not true, she said with certainty. He only shook his head. You saw the doors. He tried to convince her. They would open to an empty cave one moment and an army of cultists the next. I don't know what I saw, Hannah Lynn admitted, but I can promise you that there is no time-traveling wizard coming to bring magic back to the world. Scene change. Scene change. Alright. In a totally different alley than the last one, T-Boat was unbuttoning his pants to rock a piss. It's not that there was anything wrong with the last alley. T-Boat was just pretty sure he'd peed there before, and he tried to make it a habit to pee in the same. He tried to make it a habit not to pee in the same place twice, like a dog. By marking their territory in as many different places as they can, they minimize damage to the vegetation, prolong the cycle of life. As a radio DJ living in Toronto, it was T-Boat's job to know random things like that. They called his segments T-Boat's Arcs of Truth, and he came on every hour at the 15. He knew that global warming was a myth. After all, the climate of the Earth had changed 100 different ways in a million years. He knew Donald Trump was the best thing to happen to the U.S. Republican candidacy, and Trudeau was the worst thing. And Trudeau was the worst thing to happen to Canada. And T-Boat knew his girlfriend was cheating on him. It was the perfume he smelled on her when she left, the same one she would wear when she cheated on her last boyfriend with him. He was pretty sure she assumed him in the dark, but he could point to the very day on a calendar when she started, and before that, he knew the day he lost her, when his shit piled up to the point when she stopped looking at him that certain way anymore, stopped being patient with the things that annoyed her. Just that night she'd accused him of being an Oreo, black on the outside, but white in the middle, whatever that meant. He knew he'd have to break up with her, but it was an act easier said than done, and right now, T-Boat was having a hard enough time pulling his fly down on his $2,000 dark purple suit. This was going to feel so good. T-Boat was so distracted by his streaming release of pressure and thoughts of his girlfriend that he didn't even notice the crackling in the air, and the wind that had picked up just felt like more Canadian winter. As for the explosion of lightning that created an orb of mystical energy that spit forth a body from seemingly nothingness, well, T-Boat was really drunk. The body stirred in a puddle, thriving and kicking out with his limbs. The man was older, with dark black skin, gray hair, and unshaven stubble. He was seemingly testing his limbs, flexing the fingers in his hands, and then rotating his wrists and so on, as if making sure they were all there. A can he kicked made a noise that finally snapped T-Boat out of his trance. You okay over there? T-Boat asked, shaking himself clean. Oh, shaking his dick, I'm guessing. He chuckled. Oh, what are you wearing, brother? Looked like some kind of bathrobe. Ikna, blaka, bu takadu. Holy shit, my Xbox just turned itself off. No, bad Xbox. No. Oh no. Xbox on. Damn Xbox. See, I told you it was hot in here. I said I was overheating. And then, hey, what do you know? My Xbox is dying. Hello? Hello. Alright. Let's bring you... No! I keep trying to... keep selecting the wrong thing. That would have been horrifying if I had brought the other thing there. There we are. Alright. Sorry about that. My Xbox died and it killed everything. Alright. So, T-Boat is a radio DJ who's losing his girlfriend, and he's peeing in an alley when suddenly some dude appears out of nowhere. And that dude is a POC, person of color as well. And he speaks weird. Ikna, blaka, bu takno, the elder man said unintelligibly. Cool story, bro, T-Boat told the man, zipping up his pants. Well, I'm done here. You want me to call you a cab? The man seemed pained and leaned against the wall of the alley. His eyebrows were furrowed. T-Boat could finally say he knew what that looked like. And his mouth opened, but at first no sound came out. Then, you are brother. T-Boat snorted, raising his hand in front of his face as if to check. At least on the outside, he told the man, finally scrutinizing him more closely. Did some white dudes take your clothes or something? Something, the man muttered, shivering in his robe. I'm cool. Well, yeah, T-Boat said, pointing to the ground. You were just lying in that puddle. You got a name? The man asked. What name are here outside? Waving his arms wildly and turning in a circle, What was wrong with this man? "Do you mean, where are you?" T-Boat asked. "Man, I know I've had a lot to drink, but you must be trashed. You're in Toronto, man." The elder repeated the word, "Toronto." "Wait," T-Boat said as his heart skipped a beat. He thought the guy looked familiar, and his voice was almost dead on. "Are you Morgan Freeman?" Maybe he was doing some kind of research for a role. No, wait, that would be dumb. "What are Morgan Freeman?" "Who is?" T-Boat corrected the man's grammar. "He's an actor, man. I don't know. Looks like you, kinda sounds like you, too. Has a better grasp of words, though." "Cool story, bro." Let me try that line again. "Cool story, bro." The old man seemed to be repeating things that T-Boat was saying. Who, what, where? Who, what, where? The man said, repeating the words to himself. When, why, and how? Wow, it's super windy out there. Insanely windy out there. That's like hurricane winds. That's horrifying. Interesting. Anyway, let's finish this chapter. When, what, how? T-Boat finished the man's sentence. Why do you keep talking like that? The man simply smiled. Keep talking, he said to T-Boat. I want you to keep talking. I want a better grasp of words. Maybe it was the alcohol slowly leaving his system, but T-Boat was starting to think there was something weird about this old man. Actually, I think I'm gonna go, he excused himself. I'm done with the alley now. It's all yours. I want your clothes, the Morgan Freeman look-alike said, more forcefully in tone than he'd been before. I want looks like you. This guy wanted his suit? That's absolutely not going to happen, he told the man slowly, stepping away. The man looked at him, and T-Boat could almost see his eyes in the dark. What he saw scared him. The man raised an arm, pointing his finger at T-Boat as if sicking a dog on him. Suddenly, his belt buckle undid itself. What the fuck? T-Boat said, looking down at his belt. Screw this whole scene. T-Boat grabbed his belt and turned tail to run. As he turned, his jacket pulled against him and slipped free of his right arm. It pulled against his left, and finally he let it go to run as fast as he could from the alley. His jacket soared across the length of the alley to land lightly in the strange old man's hands. As T-Boat ran, his pants pulled at his legs, throwing them out from under him and smacking his face into the pavement. No! T-Boat screamed, and scratching and struggling to crawl free. His pants were pulling down his legs and popped off with his shoes. Reaching into his pants pocket, the old man pulled T-Boat's wallet free and started sifting through it. What are you doing over there? Oh, no, that's wrong voice. Sorry. What are you doing over there? T-Boat yelled at the man from the ground, trying to see. Suddenly a force grabbed him by his ankles and lifted him into the air to dangle upside down. His tie was unweaving even as his shirt unbuttoned. Come on, man! The man seemed to have found T-Boat's driver's license and read it aloud. 87, Queen Street, room 6407. He felt a bulge in the jacket pocket and grasped T-Boat's apartment key. That was it. Stay the fuck away from my place, or I swear to God I'll kill you. There was a certain censored word there that I will not say, because I am a white man. But if you are a person of color, as both people in this scene are, then they are welcome to say that word. So as I was saying, stay the fuck away from my place. I was going to do or I swear to God I'll kill you. T-Boat screamed angrily at the man who seemed to pay him no mind. It was a completely empty threat, of course, with T-Boat hanging helplessly upside down. It was all he could do to struggle vainly against his invisible captor, watching as a scary stranger slipped into his clothes. I'm going to kill you! T-Boat repeated, throwing his fist at the man. I'll kill you! I'll kill you! He kept throwing his fists until he tired himself out, and then he began gasping for breath. His approach changed. Come on, man, he said, trying to reason with the stranger. You don't have to do this, man. The man finished putting on his clothes and tying his tie. "Come on, man, don't do this." The man stepped out from the shadows, stopping face to upside-down face with T-Boat. "Don't do this," T-Boat whispered. The stranger's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Did some white dudes take your clothes or something?" he said with what seemed like earnest confusion. T-Boat went silent, confused himself. T-Boat tried to look deeper into the stranger's eyes. What was his problem? How was he doing all this? The old man raised his hand, fingers angled as if screwing in a light bulb into a socket. Then, like screwing in a light bulb, the old man turned his hand. T-Boat watched with little comprehension. His head, suddenly and ever so slowly, began to turn. T-Boat screamed, and his scream got louder and louder until abruptly cutting short. And that's the end of Chapter 0. I will not be reading Chapter 1 today because that was a long goddamn chapter. 2 hours? God damn! That was 34 pages. That was a 34-page prologue. As I said, these chapters can get long, and that's on the short side. It's so long I might have to do these audiobooks in 2 parts for each chapter, especially when they're that long. Like, god damn. So yeah, that is an example of how like every chapter is going to be from now on. It's going to be long like that, except they're going to be more focused on our main characters and not random side stories. That was more kind of like setting things up with cold opens. It was like 4 different cold opens all at once. Cold open, cold open, cold open, cold open. 4 different stories, only sort of related. They're all going to be dealt with. You're going to see urban fantasy right here. It's awesome. You should check it out. So that's another episode of that. I believe the next thing I'm going to be reading is the Aldon Chronicles, Chapter 1 of that. So that's something to look forward to. There are a lot of other things going on right now, though, at 99geek.ca. If you've enjoyed this 2-hour freaking podcast, you can go there. You can find my books. I put them out for free on my blog. I put them up on this podcast, but then also you can just pay $1, just $1, and you'll get them in these awesome PDFs that you can download on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer. You can print them with a printer if you want. I don't give a shit. But just pay $1, and you'll have access to everything I've ever written, ever. There's a script. If you remember, there was John and Erica. They are from a script that I wrote that will never be available anywhere except on Patreon, mainly because I've lost the editing file, so I'll never be able to edit it. So it's got a ton of typos and stuff. But if you pay $1, you can still get the story and struggle through it, which probably isn't very selling. I'm not doing a very good job of selling this right now. There's also video game streams. I just recently streamed Battlefield 5. That was fun. Other than that, I just keep writing and writing and writing. This month I'm writing about Isabel Tseng, Voice News reporter. She's in Iraq, trying to cover, now that ISIS has been supposedly defeated, she's trying to cover what's been going on there and what the recovery is like, and it's not good. And so that's what this month's chapter is going to be on my Patreon, so you can look forward to that. And by this month's chapter, I just realized it's still February. That's next month's chapter. That's March's chapter. February's chapter is actually Aldon Chronicles, and which you've been introduced to. This week's Aldon Chronicles, Frankie and Aldon and Edward are trying to stop the Thieves Guild from stealing from the Mage Council. So they get jobs at a local port. Meanwhile, Princess Penelope tries to stop a child exploitation ring from using love potions to exploit children. So that's going to be an interesting storyline that you can check out if you want to. That's all at 99geek.ca, so if you want, check it out there. Other than that, I really pray to God you
leave a review somewhere. Like leave a review on your podcast thing so more people see it and they check out this thing. You can leave go to Amazon. I'm always offering free books and deals on Amazon. Recently all my books were on for free and now they're not, so I should have mentioned that sooner. But yeah, you could have grabbed that and then leave a review there if you can. If let's say you leave a review without buying the book, like, hey, I read this elsewhere, can I still review? Do it, because I need reviews. It'll help get more people to come and read my books. So that's just help me build a viewership, a listenership, a readership, an audience. Help me build an audience. Build and do it by following me on Twitter at Andrew Gatesy, GECZY. That's ANDREWGECZY. Just do that. It's awesome. Bring your friends. It'll be fun.